Today we're going to do our final long-term review of the Coros Apex. Before I can do that, I gotta check out the track feature. So we're at the Western Dubuque High School track. And we're gonna see how well this watch does at keeping track of track. All right, coming up on the 1 mile mark, or at least 4 laps, 1,600 meters. The Coros has me at 0.99 miles, pretty good. The Stryd footpod that I'm using with the Coros Apex had me at the 1 mile mark with about 50 meters still to go. So at about 15 feet, 50 meters. It's pretty interesting. All right, just past the 4 mile mark. It ended up being about 50 meters past the 4 lap mark. On the Stryd footpod and Coros Apex, that same amount, 4 miles. On the Coros Apex, 4 miles and 50 meters on the track. Ended up being 4 miles and 0.22 miles on that watch. Just hit the 6 mile mark, 5.96 miles on the Coros. Polar showing 6.3. I don't know what happened there. Whew. Just about to hit the 10 mile mark, according to my Polar and Stryd footpod, and I am maybe about 10 meters short of the start line. According to Coros Apex in the track mode, I'm only at 9.44 miles. I don't know how far I've run. I lost track. I mean, I wasn't counting the number of laps, so I don't know how far I've actually gone. But this is a big difference. All right. All right, sorry. All right, 10 miles on the dot, at least according to, let's finish this activity. 10 miles on the dot, according to the Coros Apex and the track run feature. The tracing looks pretty good, at least from what I could see from the watch face. Not super precise, but 10.00 miles, according to the Polar Grit and the Stryd footpod, 10.61. I don't think I've ever seen that much difference on between the footpod and Polar and Coros. So definitely an unusual situation. I don't know if there's going to be a way for me to be able to go back and look at how many laps I actually did. And you saw where I stopped, pretty much like maybe 125 meters after the kind of last lap that I completed. So I know 1,600 meters isn't exactly a mile, so I'll have to do some math and kind of figure that out. But I don't know, interesting results today. Not at all what I was expecting. But I'm gonna walk back to the car now. I gotta go pick up some groceries. My wife placed an order at Hy-Vee, and they do kind of like a curbside pickup. So we just get there, call them, let them know you're there, and then they bring it out. And we'll head home, take a look, some more of this data from the watch, and do my long-term review of Coros Apex. 10.0 miles today, I think. Depending on which set of metrics you look at, I had some pretty different results from the Coros Apex and comparing it against the Polar Grit X with a Stryd footpod. But before I get to my thoughts on the way that the track run feature went today, I do want to go over some disclosures. The Coros Apex is a watch that I purchased with my own money. No one sent it to me. And just for comparison purposes, I am using the Stryd footpod, which I purchased with my own money, and a Polar Grit X, which is a watch that was sent to me for the purpose of review. Other devices that I'm testing are the Polar OH1 and the Polar H9. I use the OH1 with the Coros Apex and the Polar H9 heart rate monitor with the Polar Grit X, so I could have external heart rate monitoring, and those devices were provided by Polar for the purpose of review. Those are all just devices that, when I'm not testing other things, those are the ones that I like to use, so that's why I use them as kind of reference devices. But in either event, regardless of who provided which device, no one's paying me to make this video or to include their products in a video, and no one's gonna get a chance to preview any of my footage or thoughts until you guys get a chance to see this video on YouTube. Whew, the disclosures were a little bit voluminous this time. But anyway, with that out of the way, let's talk about what happened on the track out there today. So I got on the track. I was thinking I would run, I don't know, a handful of miles, depending on how I felt. Ended up running 10 miles on the track on this day, or I think I did. I didn't really keep track of miles because I figured both of the watches would be pretty similar and it wouldn't really matter in terms of whether I ran exactly 40 laps or not. I just figured at some point I'd get close to 10 miles on both and I'd just stop. But it ended up being that what was exactly 10.00 miles, which was, I think, like a certain number of laps plus what felt like 150, maybe 120 meters, ended up being about 10.61 miles on the Stryd and Polar combo. As far as heart rate went, I used 2 external heart rate monitors. I got 141 beats per minute on average with both of those, so I got pretty consistent results, which is what I would expect. But the other results that varied were the pace, which makes sense because there was a different amount of distance that each watch thought I ran. So the Coros thought I ran 10.0 miles at 8 minutes 41 seconds per mile. And the Polar and Stryd combo thought I ran 8 minutes and 12 seconds per mile. So that's quite a bit of difference. As far as power goes, the Coros Apex, like a couple other watches that are out on the market now, can give you power. The wrist-based power number from Coros Apex was 218, and the footpod-based power number from the Stryd power meter was 204. So a little bit of difference depending on which set of devices I was using. And this is kind of a surprise to me because I've never really seen this much variance in terms of devices. The closest thing that I could say where I've seen this before is like when you're comparing like a phone's GPS to like a dedicated like running watch GPS. And then for the rest of the time, like running watch GPS, it's all like similarly good or similarly bad depending on conditions, and rarely do I see a big variance. For example, like I looked on a couple of other activities that I did yesterday. I went for, I had 2 activities yesterday. I did a 5K time trial and then I did a little cool down on the bike. On the bike, I just wanted to ride for an hour. The Coros Apex gave me 11.80 miles, and the Polar Grit X gave me 11.88 miles, so pretty close over the course of an hour. And for the 5K time trial, the Coros Apex gave me 3.10 miles, and the Polar Grit X and Stryd combo gave me 3.13 miles. So in both of those situations, pretty close, not a lot of variance there. And that's pretty consistent with what I've seen on just my regular everyday usage. I very rarely go to a track. In fact, this was the first time I've been on a track probably in 2020. Oh, I think maybe one other time in 2020, maybe 2 other times in 2020 I've been on a track. So it's not very common for me to be on a track, but I felt like this is a thing that they're really touting as being a big feature. So I thought it really behooved me to do that. And I think that there's something to it. I think that it's actually pretty useful because I can't count and run at the same time. And having something like this, especially if you're going to do more than like 1 or 2 laps at a time, I think it's kind of really useful to have. Now, the way that it works is that it uses GPS plus a special kind of like algorithm when it's in track mode to be able to do this. So when you want to go run on the track, you have to like have like just the track run only. So like if you're like running to the track and then running on the track, you'd probably want to split it up into 2 separate activities.
which is frustrating because I kind of do that when I do run a track. That's a lot of the times what I do, and I kind of just like to make it one big activity. But you probably are going to have to separate it out. And instead of starting a run on the watch, you'll start a track run on the watch. And then you'll tell it which lane you're in. And then like whether you're in lane 1 or maybe there's people on the track and you're out in lane 8. And then you're going to need to stay in that lane for the entire time. And then once you start it, then like it took maybe about 50 to 100 meters, less than 100 meters for it to like recognize and like lock into the track. So I don't know how much that has an effect on it. I'm assuming it didn't. I think it was still kind of keeping track of my distance before it gave me that notification. But it gave me a notification like saying like, yep, we see that you're on a track. And then it kind of went into more track mode. I'm not really sure what the difference was. But pretty soon I was able to see like a little bit of difference, which is pretty normal from when I'm comparing two GPS watches, like one on each wrist. I never get like the exact same distance and pace. I don't know why that is. It just never happens, even if it's the same brand. I've never tested two of the same watch before, but I would imagine even if I tested two of the same exact watch, I'd probably still have the same kind of variance. So it's not something that's unusual for me to see a little bit of variance. But as I got like, once I was at like the 5 miles like point, I did stop to go to the restroom. So I paused my watch, and I don't know if like that made things worse, but it didn't seem, and as I was going through and looking at the data, it didn't seem that it got really weird until like the 7th mile. And then like the Polar Grid X had me like making really wide loops, not like horribly wrong tracings, but like really wide. And I think that's when like the gap really started to appear. And so if I just kind of stopped at the nearest lap after like the 10, mile mark, then I think I would have shortchanged myself like half a mile as much as that today. So if you're someone that does a lot of laps around the track, then the Coros and its track run feature is definitely something I think you should look at. Because one of the things I was able to do is go back and verify that I did actually run 40 laps. Now, here's one of the areas where I feel like Coros is lacking in terms of like my long-term review of living with this Coros Apex for about a month now, is that like it's kind of, you don't get a lot of ability to really like dissect your data. So if all you're looking for is like, I want like distance and pace, maybe some cadence, maybe some power, like during the run, and then after the activity is done, I don't want to go look back at it anymore, then I think the Coros is going to probably give you what you need. But what I like about the Polar ecosystem is the way that it just lets you look and like slice and dice your data. So one of the things I can do is I can go through like my entire run, and I'll have like the tracing. And I know there's other apps that can do that too. So it's not, I don't think this is the only app that I've seen do it. But Polar lets me kind of like go through each mile, and I could see myself like looping the track 4 times. So I was able to verify that I did run 40 laps today, and that the Polar like told me that even though I ran 40 laps plus about 110, 120 meters or so, it still had me at 10.61 miles. So that's definitely a little bit off there. And so I think what it has to do with is the precision of like GPS that like regular people have access to. It's just not precise enough to really follow you around a track. And that's why even like this competition that I just ran in yesterday's video was a virtual race for trial of miles across country competition, and they specified that you can't run on anything that has like more sharp of a turn than say a track, because then it would make like verification of your results by GPS really difficult. So it's like something that's known in the industry that I think Coros has definitely gone and solved that problem with this new algorithm. So pretty cool. The other thing that I really like that I tested recently in the Coros Apex is the way that you can add like a structured workout. So a lot of days I just like to go out and run for like an hour, hour and a half, easy. Maybe I'll have some sort of speed play in there where I might do like 2.5 minutes on and a 1 minute of like easy jogging, and just kind of repeat until I'm kind of like done for the day, or like run out of road for the loop that I'm running. So, but other days I might have something very specific. Maybe I have like 2 mile repeats, and then 2 half-mile repeats, and then like 4 400s, something like that. And each of those has to be run at a different intensity, and each of those has a different rest period in between each of the reps. Or maybe I have like a mile, half, and a quarter, and then I have to do 2 or 3 sets of those. So like it can get complicated in terms of your workouts. I don't like complicated workouts, but I know a lot of them exist and a lot of coaches write them. It's hard to kind of remember all the distances, intensities, and rests, especially for me, someone who can't count to 40 while running. So I have a hard time, I admit, I have a hard time counting even to like 5 when I'm running. So definitely hard to remember. So being able to input that into the watch is something that I usually like to do. A lot of watches make it really difficult to do that, especially like they can get parts of it pretty good, but then it's like, well, there's always something left to be desired. But I think that the Coros Apex really nails all the aspects to it. One, it's easy to do. You do it on your phone and then it syncs really quickly to the watch. So I think that they nailed it. It lets you pick the distance that your each rep is going to be. It lets you pick the intensity. And by intensity, you can pick pace, heart rate, cadence, and power. So there's lots of different ways. No matter how you're training, you could probably find a way to enter in your workout here. And then it lets you pick your rest period. The only thing that it doesn't let you do, which I kind of wish that it would let you do, is pick like the intensity of your rest period as well. Because sometimes people have like, 90 seconds rest. And that means like standing around. Other times it's like 90 seconds jog. Other times it might be something like 90 seconds jog at easy pace or at a certain heart rate or a certain like power number. And so I wish there was something that I could do to make that happen as well, but there isn't. But overall, it works really well. It syncs up really quickly to the phone. The way that you do that is you go into the watch, you go into the phone and you hit the watch icon all the way in the right. Then you go to My Training, hit Add a Workout, the plus sign up top, and then you hit the plus sign at the top again to say Create a Workout. And that's where you have all those options to choose like the amount, duration of the warm up, the number of reps and the intensity and the distances, the rest, and then the amount of cool down. And then you have to like add it to your watch and then actually not only put it to add, like you add it to like a cue to add to your watch, and then you have to actually make sure you sync the watch. So that's the harder part. And then the last part that you have to remember in all this, there's a lot of steps, but it's once you do it a couple of times, it'll become second nature. It gets pretty intuitive. Instead of choosing a run for when you want to do this workout, you have to pick training as like your activity. And so that's where the added workouts will be. And you can check that like before you get out there for your workout too. And it all works out really well. When you're doing it, it lets you know which, like if you're doing multiple sets of something, it lets you know, or reps of something, it lets you know which rep you're on within the set. So that's really helpful too. So it lets you like kind of figure out, do I have 4 more left or do I have 5 more left? Like that's like a really important question in the middle of the workout. And it definitely gives you a heads up on that. And also as you're coming to the end of something. So for example, if I'm running like a 2.5 minute rep at threshold pace, as I'm like the last 5 seconds of that 2.5 minutes, it'll start beeping at me, letting me know that the rest period is coming. And then once the rest period is ending at like the last 5 seconds, it'll beep like on every second, letting me know that I got to get ready to gear back up again. So I really like the way it works. The only one downside that I have to it, other than the fact that like creating the workout is maybe 1 or 2 too many like clicks that you need to do. I think they could really streamline that a bit. The only thing that I don't like about it is like when it's done. So let's say I've done the warm up, the reps and the sets, and then the cool down, the activity just ends, which I don't like because a lot of my workouts I like to put on the road. I don't like to put them on the track. And so like I might have done a really long loop and I've done the workout, and then I might just have like after my 5 or 10 minute cool down, I might still have like another mile left before I get home just because of the way that the loops end up working out. And in that situation, I'd have to start a new run activity and have like another like mile at the end of it, so that could be like a little weird little like dangling participle kind of thing. So I don't really like that. I wish it would just like end the workout and then maybe start another lap and then just let me keep running and keep recording my pace, distance, heart rate, that kind of thing. But other than that, it works really good. And I enjoy that feature. I think it's probably the best implementation that I've seen since I've used some apps on the Apple Watch. Some of the apps, like I think it's iSmooth Run 26.2, does it fantastically well as well. It makes it really simple. It even saves it so that way you can use that like your previous workouts as templates for new ones. So I like it there. I love the way they're doing it here on the Coros Apex. So with those 2 things, do big pluses for the last 2 features that I didn't get a chance to review early on. Now that I've had a chance to review those 2 as well, I have like kind of all my thoughts together now on this watch, having lived with it for a little while. And I think there's a lot of things that this watch is doing right. I've got the bigger 46 millimeter version of the Coros Apex, and the list price is, I think, $350. And I think that's pretty much a fair price because you're getting quite a bit of really good running watch in here that has a lot of capabilities as well. So it's not just good sensors, but also good, like they're leveraging and using them well. So you've got the altimeter, you've got the compass, you've got an epically long battery. I'm getting just shy of 2 weeks of use out of this. So it's an amazing amount of battery life to have in there. Other things that are really great, in addition to like the track run feature, if you're into that, and then the workout feature, which again, I don't always do workouts, but when I do, I want to have it like structured in the watch so I don't have to remember things. That also, the way they've implemented that works really, really well. The watch syncs really quickly. A lot of other watches that I work with, it takes a while for it to sync, and I just feel like, what is it doing that's making it take so long? The Coros watch seems to sync like almost instantly. When it doesn't sync instantly, that's when I'm like, oh, that's when you realize like, oh, okay, it's normally like really fast. Every once in a while, it takes a little bit more time. The data fields that I'm able to see while I'm running work pretty well. I can customize them and see as many data fields as I need to, and it's bright enough that I could see it while I'm working out. I've done the maps, like the navigation, and it was okay. It's nice to have them, but I didn't think they were excellent. I didn't think they were bad. They were just okay. I get lost really easily, even despite having good technology. I got lost while using these a couple of times, but that's not necessarily mean that it's bad. It just, again, a reflection of how bad I am at navigating. But it works. But, I felt like there was a little bit more to be desired from it. I wish it gave me a little bit more visual data. I wish it gave me some of that turn-by-turn kind of like prep. Letting me know that a turn is coming. And then I wish there was a way of like giving me some sort of confirmation that I'm on the right spot, or a more persistent you're in the wrong spot notification. So those are some of the things that I was wishing for from the maps. The other things I like is I think that like there is a decent phone app for you to look at some of your running history, but there isn't a way to really like do analytics on it, or for me to like pull trends from the data. I can look at each like individual day, and like that's pretty much it. So each activity seems to be like a one-off, and I don't get to really see the arc or like see like the progression. And even with looking in one day, I can't like drill down and see like, well, what was going on in this like 2 mile stretch, or what was going on in the last half of it. That's kind of hard to do within the native Coros app. So that's something that I wish that they would improve as well. The other thing that leaves much to be desired is that like there's almost never any reason for me to look at the watch other than to figure out what time it is, or to look at it while I'm training. There are data fields that you can kind of like look at, but none of them are useful for me, and I never find myself like looking at the watch as a source of like information. For example, you can't even look at, like, let's say I finished a workout. I can't look at the parameters of that workout like later. So like right when I finish it and it's like saved, it's nice. It gives you like a little map, like a pictogram of like where you just ran and some of the metrics there. Once I click out of that, I can't get it back. I don't know where it goes. Maybe there's just something that I'm very basic that I'm missing, but I can't find it. And the only way that I can go back and look at it is to like go to the phone, which is not terrible. I wish there was a little bit more of a richer way that I can interact with the watch more, but there just isn't a lot. The other thing I don't like about it is that there's only 2 buttons, like a digital crown, which is like a scrolly wheel and a clicky wheel thing, and then a second button too. I think they could use another 2 buttons on it to make the user interface just a little bit more intuitive. Sometimes you scroll, sometimes you click and then scroll, and then sometimes you hit back once, sometimes you have to hit back a couple of times to get back to like the previous or to the next screen. So that gets to be a little annoying. And then I don't know if there's a way to adjust the sensitivity of the scroll wheel, but I always feel like I'm doing this. Like I have to really push to get it to scroll to the next like menu every time I do it. And that's a hard, annoying activity to do like while you're running, or especially when I'm like riding on a bike, and I'm trying to like pedal as fast as I can. It gets a little bit annoying. So I wish there was a little bit of a easier way that I could like very quickly, without having to look at the watch or think about it, like with a tactile kind of way, advance to the next screen. One thing that isn't really a knock, but that's something that I had to do is I couldn't get a very reliable heart rate during training from this. And I had to resort to using an external heart rate monitor, but that's something that I have to do for all GPS watches or running watches. I don't know what it is about my anatomy. My wrists are too skinny or something like that. But like no watch is able to give me an accurate heart rate reading while I'm running. So it's not necessarily a knock on it, but it's something that I did have to do. The other thing that is related to that, though, is there's sleep tracking within this watch. And I feel like it does a pretty decent job of kind of figuring out when I fell asleep and when I was awake and any like disruptions that I have. But I don't feel like it really gave me any meaningful insights into like my sleep. Like it didn't tell me if like it thought my sleep was good or if because like sometimes you get a lot of sleep, but it might not be quality sleep. And I don't really feel like I got those kind of distinctions from this watch. It tell me how much sleep I got, and it could tell me like, you know, which sleep was like maybe deeper than other periods of sleep or when there were interruptions. But I don't feel like it could give me like an overall reading of like this was not quality sleep or this was quality sleep. So that's some of the data that like I really find very useful as I've been thinking a lot more about sleep as my most powerful recovery tool. And so I've been trying to think about ways of gauging and monitoring how well I'm sleeping. So that's another area where I feel like it's already taking my heart rate data. They just need to be able to figure out how to like put those kind of valuations or evaluations on top of it. But I'm not getting that quite yet, or not enough of it quite yet. One last thing is kind of hodgepodge as I'm like thinking about all the last things that I liked and didn't like about the watch. I did like that, like the GPS lock tended to be really quick. Like I probably because I'm in the same area. I don't know if they're doing something with it, having it make sure it looks like in a very similar area from the last activity. But like I always felt like the GPS signal got acquired really, really fast. So again, something that if you've ever stood outside like waiting for like a minute for your GPS signal to like lock on, you know how important it is and how nice it is when GPS locks on quickly. And this watch pretty much every single time locked on very quickly for me. So pretty impressed. Overall, I think this is a quality watch from especially when you consider that this company isn't that old. And I think that at the price point, it's pretty aggressively priced at $350. I think you are getting quite a bit of functionality for this. So I'd say it's a pretty good value. It works pretty well. It definitely gives me all the types of data that I want in terms of collecting data. There's a couple of other things on kind of like the analytical end that I would really like to see a little bit more from. But I feel like this is a really great place for this product to be at this price point, and I really can't fault it too much at this $350 range. So overall, I think the Coros Apex is a pretty impressive watch and definitely one that I could easily recommend to a lot of people that are out there. So those are my thoughts on the Coros Apex after about, I think, 4 weeks now, about a month. If you have any questions about it, feel free to put them down in the comments down below. That's all I have for today, everybody. Thanks so much for making it all the way to the end of the video. Hopefully you guys are staying safe out there on your runs, and I'll see you in the next one.
Yo, what's going on?